Good evening. We'll start tonight by reading from Matthew chapter 11 and verse 28 through 30. Come to me, all ye who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. We know that as Christians, God helps to carry our burdens, but I think we all also know that becoming a Christian doesn't automatically remove the stress from our lives. We don't just wake up one morning and feel that every burden we ever had has been eased or lifted. As Christians, our burdens are eased as we take them to God and as we leave those burdens with Him when we trust Him. Psalm chapter 55 and verse 22 reads, Cast your burden on the Lord, and He shall sustain you. He shall never permit the righteous to be moved. Likewise, in 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 7, casting all your cares on Him, for He cares for you. God will and does ease our burdens when we bring them to Him, and when we trust Him, He will sustain us. He will keep those, and He will help us. But I find that the trouble and that what I struggle with is the actual bringing my burdens to God, the actual asking of God in prayer. And so I was studying, and I wanted to know why do I sometimes find it difficult and even sometimes daunting to approach God's throne. And in studying, I found there was many reasons, but all those reasons seem to fit into two categories. And those two categories are really polar opposites, but both hinder us from bringing our burdens to God. Firstly, I believe I carry a heavy burden because of my pride. I carry a heavy burden because I believe that I am smart enough or strong enough to do it without God's help. I believe that I am able to do everything by myself. I carry a heavy burden because I believe I am resilient, because I am overconfident in my ability to carry the weight alone, and I think that it does not affect me. I carry a heavy burden because I believe I am solely responsible for my success, and that my achievements are my own doing and a result of my own hard work and tenacity. It's pride that prevents us from seeking God in prayer. It's our own self-righteousness, it's our own self-worth that sometimes can hinder us from going to God when we really need Him. We have the account in Daniel chapter 4 when Nebuchadnezzar looks out over his kingdom and he says essentially, look at all the things that I built. Look at all that I have with my own hands that I did for myself, for my own throne, and for my own edification and glory. And we see in that passage that God humbles him. God makes him like a beast of the field, it says, for 7 periods. And after that time is up, God restores him. And we see Nebuchadnezzar say in Daniel chapter 4 and verse 37, Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, for all his works are right and his ways just, and those who walk in pride he is able to humble. I'd also like to reread 1 Peter 5:7 that we read just a moment ago, but I'll read it this time with verse 6 as well. 1 Peter 5 and verse 6 and 7, Therefore humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time, casting all your cares upon him, for he cares for you. Before we can cast our cares upon God, we must humble ourselves below him. We must be willing to admit that we cannot do everything ourselves, that we're not as strong as we might often think that we are, and we have to admit that we need to pray for strength. We need someone to rely on, and we need the forgiveness that God is willing to give in order for us to continue to grow. We have to admit that God is the ultimate source of all of our success, all of our achievements, all of the good things in our life that we take advantage of. And I'll give you an example of what that mentality and what that prayer looks like. 2 Chronicles chapter 14, verse 9 through 11. Then Zerah the Ethiopian came out against them with an army of 1,000,000 men and 300 chariots, and he came to Marishah. So Asa went out against him, and they set their troops in battle array, And Asa cried out to the Lord his God, saying, Lord, it is nothing for you to help, whether with many or with those who have no power. Help us, O Lord our God, for we rely on you, and in your name we go against this multitude. O Lord, you are our God. Do not let man prevail against you. But I believe we have a second thing that keeps us from going to God. So secondly, I carry a heavy burden because of shame. I carry a heavy burden because I am embarrassed. I carry a heavy burden because sometimes I feel guilty. See, fear also can prevent us from asking what we need of God, and unlike pride, it's its opposite. It doesn't come from a place of arrogance. It doesn't come from a place of ignorance. Shame comes from a place of knowing that we've done something wrong. Now that I know better, or even if I knew better at the time, I'm ashamed of my sin and I feel the guilt that my sin carries. But the things we do, the mistakes we make, they shape us. Oh, excuse me. Mixing up my pages, I'm sorry. The mistakes we make shape us, and we cannot allow our pride or our shame to separate us from God. There we go. Even better. On the right page. There's no shame in asking God for forgiveness or praying for help. There's no shame in asking God for anything. At the end of the day, God already knows what we've done. We're not going to God and telling him this for the first time. It's not like he's never known about it. And God doesn't laugh at us when we make mistakes. God doesn't laugh at us when we come to him at a low point in our life. He doesn't laugh when we fail. He's never angry, and he'll never refuse to listen to us. There's no shame in struggle. God gave us struggle. It's a beautiful thing to help us, to shape us, and shame only exists in the things that we wish to hide from God. You think of Adam and Eve in the garden when they ate of the tree of good and evil and they tried to hide from God. What good did it accomplish? Did God not know what they did because they were hiding? Shame only exists in the things that we wish to hide. God only wants to help us. He wants to better us. He wants us to put away those things that we've done, the mistakes that we made, and be part of him, to continue to grow and to continue to be better. But he cannot do that if we withhold a part of ourself from him, especially if that's the part that truly needs him. Psalm chapter 31, verse 17 says, Do not let me be ashamed, O Lord, for I have called upon you. Let the wicked be ashamed. Let them be silent in the grave. Hiding from God and avoiding certain topics in prayer to try and spare ourselves some shame or some embarrassment will never make anything better. It will never help. But what will help is asking God for forgiveness, for asking for strength, to ask him to help us bear our burden so that we can continue to grow and to get out of the place where fear might exist, where our fear and shame stem from. 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 10 says, But may the God of all grace, who called us to his eternal glory by Christ Jesus, after you have suffered a while, perfect, establish, strengthen, and settle you. Every mistake we've ever made, whether we like it or not, has shaped us. The good and the bad shape us together. We cannot allow either our pride or our shame to separate us from God. We cannot let ourselves put up a wall in between the things that we need and asking God for them. God's strength will always be there. As we just read, it'll always be there if we trust in him to perfect us, to establish us, to strengthen us, and to settle us. We are to take the yoke that Christ has offered to us, to be yoked together with Christ, so that Christ can help us pull the load and we can learn from him and we can see what he does. And when we fall, he's already there. We're tied together with him. He sustains us. And so we never fall. He always helps us to stay afloat. And we can keep walking together and we can keep learning and keep growing so that one day we can be deep-rooted in our faith until we have surpassed both pride and shame, till we truly rely on God and draw our strength from his. So I'd like to ask you tonight, will you cast your burden on the Lord? Will you allow him to help you? Will you allow yourself to be bound to the source of all strength, the source of all morality? Will you give your burdens to God? We can't allow anything or anyone to hold us back from God in prayer. We read, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God." Philippians 4:6. In everything we do, we are to be tied to God, talking to God, asking him for strength, thanking him for the things he does do for us, so that in everything we do with God, and anybody who sets out against us is set out against God too. And that we know that we'll be successful, and that we know that we'll be able to run the race. So if anyone tonight should need any prayers at the church, or any strength or help, should anyone need to be baptized, I ask that you don't allow anything or anyone to withhold you any longer, and that you would please come forward as we stand and as we sing.